Zero trust architecture. Let's dig into it. Imagine trying to protect your house, but instead of just locking the front door, you install locks on every single room. No one can move around without permission, not even you. That's the core idea behind zero trust architecture. Never assume trust, no matter who or where the request is coming from. About 10 years ago, in the first version of my complete cybersecurity course, I referred to this concept as the zero trust model. And at the time, it was a new way of thinking about security that broke away from the traditional perimeter-based approach. Today, it's evolved into what we now call the zero trust architecture. And it's become even more crucial for organizations as networks have become more complex and distributed, and the way people have changed the way they work to be remote. So instead of assuming that anything inside the network is safe, as is traditional, zero trust treats every user, device, connection as a potential threat. The principle is pretty straightforward. You trust nothing and you verify everything. Whether someone is accessing resources from inside or outside the network, they need to prove their right to be there. And in this episode, we're going to dive into the details of zero trust and why it's more relevant than ever today, and how it's reshaping the way companies secure their systems. For a long time, businesses operated with what's called the castle and moat approach to security. The idea was simple: build a strong perimeter around your network, that's the moat, and trust everything inside. So this worked well enough when most employees worked on site using company-owned devices and when the network was self-contained. But here's the issue: that perimeter doesn't exist the way it used to. Today, we have remote workers, cloud services, personal devices accessing company data, and networks that stretch across the globe. In this environment, the traditional security model falls apart. Once someone gets inside the network, they often have free rein to move around, access systems and data with minimal checks, run ransomware, encrypt everything. It's like giving someone the keys to the entire castle or house just because they've crossed the moat. So this is where we see major vulnerabilities. With this approach, if a hacker manages to breach the perimeter through commonly phishing or malware or misconfigured application firewall, etc., they can move laterally within the network, accessing potentially sensitive data without hitting too many roadblocks. We've seen this play out time and time again in some of the biggest breaches in recent years. Think any ransomware. So where attackers were able to move inside a network undetected in these attacks for months, gathering information, escalating their access, sometimes encrypting the data, etc. So the problem with traditional security models is that they're based on trust. Once you're inside, you're trusted by default. But in a world where threats can come from both outside and inside the network, this model doesn't hold up anymore. That's why a new approach is needed, one that doesn't rely on trust, but constantly verifies every single request for access. This is where zero trust comes in. The zero trust model, the zero trust architecture, whatever you want to call it, flipping the old model on its head. So Zero Trust is built on a few core principles that completely shift how security is approached. So instead of assuming trust, Zero Trust is about constantly verifying and controlling access at every stage. So let's break it down by the main principles that define this model. So number one, verify explicitly. So in the Zero Trust model, every access request, whether it's from a user, device, or application, must be explicitly verified before being granted access. So this isn't just about logging in once at the start of the day. Every time someone tries to access a resource, the system rechecks their identity, location, device health maybe, and other factors. It's not enough to say they're inside the network, so they're good to go. Verification happens continuously, ensuring that each request is legitimate no matter where it comes from. We've got 2, least privilege access. So Zero Trust also operates on the idea of giving users the minimum amount of access they need to do their job. No more, no less. Although this is a principle that should apply anywhere in any type of model. So this is known as least privilege access. So if you don't need access to a particular system, you don't get it. Simple as that. So it limits the exposure of sensitive data and systems. So even if someone's account is compromised, the damage is contained. So for example, think about it like this. Instead of giving an employee a master key to the building, you give them only the keys to the rooms that they need to enter. If something goes wrong, then they can only affect those areas, not the entire building. 3, assume breach. So this principle might sound a bit paranoid, but it's a core idea of the Zero Trust. Always assume that your network is compromised or certainly could be compromised. In the traditional security model, the assumption is that the perimeter is secure, it's solid, and everything inside is safe. So Zero Trust flips this on the head by assuming that a breach has already occurred, or it certainly is very likely to occur. So you focus on minimizing the impact and containing any potential damage. This is where things like network segmentation come into play. By breaking your network into smaller, isolated zones, you prevent an attacker from moving freely across the systems, across the network. So if they manage to get into one part of the network, which you assume as part of assumed breach, it doesn't give them free access to then move and pivot to everywhere else. So example use case, imagine you're running a company with remote employees who need access to internal tools, internal systems, which most companies do need. So in a traditional model, once you connect through via VPN, let's say, they could have then broad access to the whole of the internal network. But in Zero Trust, each time they try to access a different resource, they need to verify their identity. There's device health checks, other factors before being allowed through. So even if one of those checks fail, like their device is unpatched or they're not in the correct location or wrong IP, then they won't get in, essentially. So these core principles, verify explicitly, least privilege access, and assume breach, work together to create a security posture that's adaptive, it's proactive, and much harder for attackers to bypass instead of relying on a single barrier on the outside. So Zero Trust ensures security is enforced at every level, every time, providing those layers of security and defense. Implementing Zero Trust requires a set of advanced tools, or certainly tools anyway, to enforce continuous verification, least privilege access, and breach containment. So let's break down some of the key technologies and provide some examples of tools and vendors that can support each. So multi-factor authentication, or MFA. MFA is essentially for ensuring that users provide their identity through multiple factors before gaining access to sensitive resources. This is the front line of Zero Trust, helping you ensure that even if credentials are compromised, unauthorized access is prevented. So you have examples like Duo Security via Cisco. That's a widely used MFA solution that integrates with cloud and on-prem apps, offering strong authentication for users. There's Microsoft Authenticator, part of the Azure Active Directory that provides the MFA for enterprise accounts, personal use. There's also Okta MFA, that's OKTA, and that again, MFA as part of their identity management platform. So these tools enforce the verify explicitly principle by making sure that each access request is backed by multiple step identity check, strengthening their security posture. So it's not just about giving a password, which is what you know. It can also be what you have, which can be some sort of security device or token. It can also be biometrics. So if someone's got your password, then they don't have these other separate factors in order to compromise your account. Let's talk about number 2. So micro segmentation or segmentation. This is breaking down the network into smaller, more isolated zones, limiting an attacker's ability to move freely if they breach the system. And we have an assume a breach. So this allows the security team to control access to different segments of the network with more precision, more control, more granularity. So we've got things like VMware NSX that provides micro-segmentation capabilities that allows that granular control of traffic and security inside data centers and cloud environments can be implemented. You've got Illumio Core, you've got Guardian Core, Centra, you've got VPNs. It can be implemented on VLANs, routers, switches. So microsegmentation enforces this assume breach principle by limiting the impact of the potential breach and preventing lateral movement across the network. 3, identity and access management, IAM. These systems ensure that only the right person or people have access to the right resource, enforcing least privilege principle. These tools provide centralized control over who has access to what. So you've got things like Okta Identity Cloud. That's a leader in IAM, offering secure identity verification, single sign-on across apps and such. Microsoft Azure Active Directory. You've got Ping Identity. So these AIM tools, they allow organizations to enforce strict access controls based on user roles and continuously update the permissions as job roles or risks evolve. Number 4, encryption. Also encryption everywhere, you can think, because encryption ensures that sensitive data remains protected depending on the type of attack, whether it's at rest or it's in transit. In the Zero Trust model, encryption is applied everywhere, ensuring that even if data is intercepted, it cannot be read or tampered with. So you can think about the Thales or Thales, THALES. They have their volumetric data security platform. This offers encryption, key management, access control to protect sensitive data, both on-prem and in the cloud. You can think about disk encryption like BitLocker. That's Microsoft's version that provides encryptions at the device level, securing the data at rest on workstations, mobile devices. Somebody runs off with the device. Things like AWS Key Management Services, KMS, manages encryption keys for cloud-based data in AWS, ensuring data is encrypted at every stage. So those encryption tools and many, many others like it, they play a crucial role in protecting data, ensuring that sensitive information remains secure no matter where it resides or is traveling. 5, continuous monitoring and analysis. So monitoring is key to detecting threats in real time and responding to anomalies before they escalate. And there's tools that provide visibility into your network activity, user behavior, and to potential security threats, ensuring that access requests and activities are always under scrutiny. You can think of tools like Splunk, or also Splunk, known as Splunk Enterprise Security. That's a powerful SIEM or SIEM tool that offers real-time analytics, monitoring. It detects suspicious activity across your organization. Microsoft Sentinel, that's a cloud-native SIEM or SIEM that integrates with Azure and other services, providing you with insights and automated responses to potential threats. You've got CrowdStrike Falcon, which is well known for the incidents that happen and cause a lot of downtime. That's a cloud-native endpoint detection and response tool, or EDR platform, that continuously monitors endpoints for malicious behavior. So these tools support the assume breach mindset by constantly watching for signs of compromise and enabling quick responses to potential threats. And by using these technologies, MFA or multi-factor authentication, micro-segmentation or segmentation, IAM, encryption, continuous monitoring, you can build the backbone of a zero trust model. And each tool plays a vital role in ensuring that access is controlled, data is protected, and threats are detected and contained quickly. Next topic is implementation challenges. So while Zero Trust architecture offers a more secure way to manage access and protect sensitive data, implementing it is not without its challenges. So shifting from a traditional perimeter-based security model to a Zero Trust model requires some careful planning, obviously investment in time and resources. There's a cultural change and shift which shouldn't be underestimated for your organization. So let's talk about some of the key challenges that businesses can face when you're trying to adopt this Zero Trust model. So 1, legacy systems compatibility. So one of the biggest obstacles to implementing Zero Trust is dealing with legacy systems. Many organizations still rely on older infrastructure that wasn't designed with Zero Trust in mind. These systems may lack the necessary support for features like continuous monitoring or advanced access control. And in some cases, legacy applications can't handle the strict verification process that Zero Trust demands, making it difficult to enforce policies across the board. So upgrading or replacing these systems can be costly and time-consuming, which is why many companies struggle with adopting Zero Trust in environments where legacy systems play a crucial role. There are ways around this by having systems that essentially present legacy systems, but it is a challenge. Number 2 is cultural resistance. Zero Trust represents a fundamental shift in how security is approached, and it often requires a change in that organizational culture. Employees and even IT teams may resist, even the security teams may resist the move to Zero Trust, although generally it does come from the security team, a shift like this. And that's because they resist it because it introduces more friction for the IT people and for the people working there, into their daily lives and their daily workflow. For example, having to authenticate multiple times throughout the day or dealing with more restricted access can feel like a burden, especially in environments used where they're used to more lenient security protocols. But really, you shouldn't have to be logging in multiple times. That can be done transparently in the background, but not always. It really depends. So 3, complexity and overhead. Zero trust implementations, they can be complex, particularly for larger organizations with multiple locations, departments, throw in cloud services as well. The process involves not only configuring technology like multi-factor authentication, identity management, and segmentation, micro-segmentation, but also continuously monitoring and managing access. And this complexity can add significant overhead for IT teams who need to continuously adjust policies, maintain security tools, and respond to security events. And also rolling out zero trust incrementally, which is often necessary to avoid disruptions, requires detailed planning and coordination. And without a phased, well-structured approach, the complexity of the model can lead to gaps in security or inefficient processes that slow down the organization. For cost and resource investment, implementing zero trust isn't cheap. It often requires investment in the new tools, technologies such as the IAM systems, the encryption solutions, the continuous monitoring tools. In addition, there's the cost of upgrading legacy systems or providing ways to access those legacy systems in a more secure way. Integrating these new technologies, training staff on the new processes. So for many organizations, particularly smaller ones or those with tight budgets, this cost can be a significant barrier. They may need to justify the investment to stakeholders and demonstrate the long-term savings and risk reductions from this zero trust architecture and model. Let's talk about how to get started with zero trust, practically. So the idea of shifting to zero trust might seem overwhelming, and that's because it can be. So, but the key is to start small and build your way up. Implement zero trust. It doesn't have to happen all at once. That's a big misconception. And taking a phased approach can make the transition much more manageable. And we can think about the following sort of things in order to get started. So start with, or think about starting with, identity and access management. That's your IAM. So that's the foundation of zero trust strategy. Begins with strong identity. You've got to know who the people are, what the devices are. You've got to establish access management. You need to ensure you know exactly who is accessing your network and your systems, and that they have the right level of access. So start by implementing multi-factor authentication, or MFA, or some other form of good authentication across your organization, or even for one function or department. And this ensures that every user's identity is verified before they can access more sensitive resources. Next, take a hard look at least privilege access, which really you should have even with the old model. So have a look at least privilege access, go through your user roles and assign permissions on a least privilege basis, access permissions to the right people and tighten them up. Make sure employees only have access to what they need for their roles. No more, no less. And this limits the damage if an account is ever compromised. And you should have policies by which there are approvals for these people. 2, prioritize high-risk areas. This is really something that you should always do in security. You should be prioritizing assets that are of most importance to the organization. So you don't have to implement zero trust everywhere right away. As I said, begin by focusing on the most critical assets, the ones that would cause the most damage or impact to the business or organization if compromised. So this might be customer data, it could be financial information or core business applications, it could be your industrial control systems, it could be whatever it happens to be for that particular organization. And if you don't know, then those are questions that you ask the business people, because they can tell you what is important to the business to keep it going, to keep it alive, etc. Sometimes it will relate to revenue, other times it will relate to health and safety, or it can relate to operations as to what's important and other things. So start by enforcing zero trust principles around these high value areas, high value assets, and use micro segmentation or segmentation to isolate these systems and apply strict access control. Now, for example, if your finance team deals with sensitive data, which they often do, start there. Implement gradual or granular access controls, continuous monitoring, and encryption to protect this key area. And then expand onto other parts of the organization. 3, implement continuous monitoring. Zero trust relies on the assumption that threats are always present. So it's important to establish continuous monitoring early on. Use tools that provide real-time visibility into network activity, user behavior, and device health, such as patch levels. Now, this allows you to detect suspicious activity and anomalies as soon as they happen, as long as you have the right tools and team monitoring. So start by developing these tools in your highest risk areas and adjust your security policies based on the insights you gain. Monitoring gives you the information you need to fine-tune your zero trust strategy as you go along. And 4, you can, as I've said, adopt a phased approach. So zero trust isn't something you can implement overnight. It's a long-term process. Break the implementation down into phases, starting with the areas that need the most protection, like sensitive data or high-value systems. Once you've established a strong foundation in these areas, gradually expand zero trust across the rest of the organization. Take it one step at a time. First, lock down identity and access management, then roll out micro segmentation, and finally integrate continuous monitoring, encryption, and each phase builds on the last, creating a comprehensive zero trust model over time. And by starting small and focusing on your most critical assets, you can begin the journey towards zero trust without disrupting your entire organization. It's about making incremental improvements and gradually building a security model that's both resilient and adaptable to the evolving threat landscape. Right, so closing thoughts on this. So zero trust architecture, it's no longer just a buzzword. It's a necessary shift in how we think about securing our systems, networks, data, and so on. As the digital landscape evolves, the threats we face are becoming more sophisticated. The traditional perimeter security models simply can't keep up. So by adopting zero trust, organizations can minimize risk, limit the impact of potential breaches, and better protect their most valuable assets. And the beauty of zero trust lies in its simplicity. Trust nothing, verify everything. It's about continuously checking who and what is trying to access your systems and making sure they truly belong there. It's not a one-time solution, but a long-term strategy that adapts as your network grows and changes. Think about phishing and ransomware, which remains two of the most common and destructive types of cyber attacks today. Phishing is often the entry point, tricking users into clicking malicious links, and no training ever seems to stop them doing it, or they're sharing sensitive information and therefore people are getting access to your systems. Now, once inside the network, ransomware, it wreaks havoc by encrypting files and demanding a ransom for the release of those files. Now, without a zero trust model, ransomware can spread like wildfire. Traditional networks with internal trust, or that trust internal traffic by default, allow attackers to move laterally, compromising multiple systems across the network. We see it time and time again. It's in the news every day, isn't it? These places obviously don't have a zero trust model or architecture. So this is what makes ransomware attacks so devastating. They don't just attack one machine, they attack the entire network. However, with the zero trust model in place, the story changes. Through the network's segmentation, through strict access controls, etc., zero trust limits the damage by restricting the attacker's ability to move beyond the initial compromised system. So even if ransomware then gains access to one machine, one person clicks on that link that they shouldn't, or they've shared something that they shouldn't, it's contained within that segment, preventing it from spreading across your entire network. This is a powerful argument for implementing zero trust, especially when defending against these prevalent threats like phishing and ransomware. And if you're serious about advancing your career in cybersecurity or starting a career in the field, I invite you to join Station X. We offer training, mentorship, and access to our inner circle of experts, helping you stay ahead of the evolving threats and thrive in the world of cybersecurity. And final thought, if you've ever enjoyed any of our content or you've enjoyed this, then please like and share this video and subscribe. It helps us much more than you realize, and I would really appreciate it. Thanks a lot.